What I've incorporated is the top portion of the leaf spring mounting pad. It extends further out, and then it has holes in it to capture the U-bolt. Here I'm in Project Misused, the sport track with 42s, coilovers, 3 links, and all that, and much more. So right now I've got the rear axle up here up front. Pull it out from the back. Eventually it's going to be trailing arms, coilovers, bump stops, all that. But for right now, just to get it on the road, it's going to be just the stock leaf springs from the sport track and then some new mounts for the axle. So what I have to do now is cut off the spring perches off the axle, make up some new ones, get the pinion angle set with the right angle for the leaf springs, get those welded up, clean this axle up, some brake components, and then I'll get it back underneath the rear. After that, it'll just be adjusting the drive shaft length and getting that mounted up, and we're getting one step closer. So let's go ahead, break down this axle, get those leaf springs mounts cut off, and move forward from there. Got all my safety gear on. Let's get cutting. Just need to get the grinder and clean that up. Let's move to the other side. Here I've got the spring perches cut off, all ground down and smoothed out. And so next thing is just to CAD design up my new leaf spring mounts and then get those cut out and welded up on here. So one step done. Where we're at today is getting ready to cut out the leaf spring perch pieces. So what I did last night is I went on my Fusion 360, created a sketch of it, and got the parts all set up, printed out on a piece of paper, and then cut those out, and I'll cut those out of the metal now. Let's go ahead now and show you what it looks like in the program. What I want to do is create a perch that has some adjustability. So the 3 center holes, left to right, or sorry, front to rear, 1 inch, and then it's got some capture holes for the U-bolts set up to be 3.5 inch tube, and then some drain holes for the bottoms. So we'll go ahead and get those pieces cut out. Like I said, create the drawing, and then now I'll transfer those to the metal. I don't have nesting software, so I did my best to try and maximize the use of the steel. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take the magnet, put all these down, mark them, and then cut them out with a plasma cutter. Now you may be asking, why am I doing it by hand? I got a CNC plasma, and it's because I just bought a new laptop and I haven't set it up for the new system with the software. So this was a little bit quicker this go around. And grind the different pieces, clap them together, that way they're all the same shape, consistency. So just got to do my plates, get some holes drilled, and then we'll be setting this up for welding. Got my template on here, magnets holding it down. I've got all my tabs cut out, all ground, ready to go. Ready to weld them up. So I'm going to have my spring plate, my axle angled pieces, and then my wings that'll cap off the end. So I'm going to go ahead and tack these up, set them on the axle, make sure they fit right, and then burn them all in. Here we are, so base plate, angles, cope for the axle tube, and it is good. No gaps, fits right on there. So I'll put my side plates on, weld those, bring that over here after the axle welded up, and put it on there, get my measurements, and fit that in. One thing I should have done first is clean up the holes beforehand, so it's easy to do that on the top ones. Here for another day. I've got last night my brackets welded up for the rear axle leaf springs. Now I just need to clean up the axle to have a clean surface to weld on. Let's go ahead and get started on that. Got all my safety gear on. I've got my grinder with my Benchmark Abrasives stripper disc. So that's going to take off all the dirt, a little rust, and whatever it is. Come take a look at the difference. So here we've got, the old paint, a little bit of rust, some dirt, and then the clean side. And you'll notice there's no sparks coming off of that. It's because the stripper disc just takes off the dirt, rust, paint without grinding the metal. The abrasive's not hard enough to take the metal down. So we'll spin this axle tube all the way around. That way when I'm done I can paint it all nice, and we'll do the other side as well. Giving these a little radius on the inside to have more angle to weld it. Next step here is getting the leaf spring mount set up in the right orientation on the axle. So it's a 39-inch center to center on the leaf spring mounts. What I've done is I've measured from the backing plate to the backing plate, figured out the overall length, subtracted that, and then divided that by 2, got the measurement from the backing plate then to the center line, which for me is 10 3/4. So then I can't get a good measurement here for that, so I wanted to measure off the edge here of the leaf spring plate to the backing plate. So I subtracted that distance, 8 3/8, and I've made a mark. So here's my center line mark, here is my edge of my leaf spring mount. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some of my angle magnets, because I want to have it set up square to the axle as well. So by setting these angle magnets up, I'll be able to get the bracket squared up to the axle. Not just orientated this way, but also this way. And that'll keep it lined up properly. So I've made my mark down here. I'm going to take my framing square, and I'm going to bring this angle magnet so it's just to the edge. That one's good. Just taking my time, measure twice, 3 times, right? Alright, so double check on both of those. Looks good. So my leaf spring mount now, I can just bring it right up and touch it there. Now I can look down through the holes and see my center line. I'm going to have to check that because it looks like it's just a little bit off, so I need to check my measurements all the way across. The other thing before I burn these in with the welder is I need to check the pinion angle against the leaf spring mount angle. So I have my pinion angle 7 degrees. That's what the setting needs to be for my application. I'm going to do a 2 degrees down for axle wrap and just driving under load. So with that calculation, I'll set the pinion, and then I'll come back here, and then at that point, my leaf spring mount needs to be at 5 degrees tilted forward. So I'll go ahead and set this at 5 degrees. Small increments. There we go. So I've got my mount oriented center line. I'll double check measurements on that again. I've got it squared up here. I've got my pinion angle set, my leaf spring mount angle set, and then I'll be able to burn these in. So one last check, and then we'll go ahead and get the welder out and burn these in. I did find out that my measurement was just a little bit off. I was about a 1/4 inch off from side to side. So I've got it recentered on both of the leaf spring mounts. I've got the angle of the pinion set. I've got the leaf spring angle set. And I just wanted to make sure that it was lined up correctly. Again, that's why I used the 2 magnets here. But another way to check it is I was using my large square. And because it's got this lip right here, I can cradle that on the axle and it doesn't turn this way. It just locks in. Then I'll take my other square and I can lay that across the top. Come in where the bottom of this square rests correctly against this one. And then drag it over and see that my holes are indeed lined up. So that way it's square, and we're ready to weld these in. It's time to weld these up now. Time for some paint now. Here I've got the rear axle in, leaf spring mounts with the U-bolts, got my top plates with the shock mounts on it, got a new parking, or not a parking brake, got a new brake line extended braided for that. Also my parking brake cables will need to be attached, but I need to swap out backing plates of the brakes, so I'll be doing that later. But it's all in, leaf springs tightened down, all secured. Let's go ahead and take a closer look. I'll show you how these spring mount with the capture plates for the U-bolts work. Now typically the U-bolt mounting pad is just as wide as the leaf spring and as long as it decides to be. But what I've incorporated is the top portion of the leaf spring mounting pad extends further out, and then it has holes in it to capture the U-bolts. And the reason why I do this is there are a lot of times I've seen the U-bolts are angled out. So when we look at the U-bolts from the back side, they're parallel with the edges of the leaf springs right here. But a lot of times if you don't have that capture plate, these U-bolts can bend out. And I just prefer the idea of having the top and the bottom holes parallel to keep it captured so this doesn't walk and have some movement in it. But that's just a personal preference for me. But again, you can see got some holes through the top pad that capture those U-bolts, keep them parallel. So here it is, all complete and attached. And then we're just going to use right now just a temporary shock mount from the pad up to right up here, the pin mount system in the top. So got to measure up for some temporary shocks for that, and a few more things. Like I said, the backing plate, I need to change out the backing plates for the brakes, so I'm going to redo the seals when I do that, pull that off, and that'll be another video. But rear axle is in. Just need to do a few more things. Another part that I did is also swapped out the speed sensor. The plug was different from the original Sport Track to this one, so I was able to swap off the Sport Track sensor into the Sterling housing, and it fit perfectly. So one other thing is I'll just need to get that drive shaft shortened and get an adapter yoke for that flange. But coming together.